Okay, then for those of you that are here, good evening, noswaith dda. Thank you all for joining us this evening. This is a webinar about progressive MS. So we've got a packed agenda tonight, and we're joined by, we've got Dr. Ian Pomeroy, who is the clinical lead for MS at Walton Centre. We've got Dr. Elzone, who's a consultant neurologist. We've also got Jen Duffy, who is the divisional director now at the Walton Centre. We've also got Hannah, and you are the research and communications officer, is that right? And we've also got Eirlys, and Eirlys is going to kick us off tonight, talking about her experiences of living with progressive MS. In the orange t-shirts, you've got myself, and Brian will be keeping an eye out on the chat tonight. So because it's so packed, if you don't mind, if you can put your questions in the chat box as we go on, and then we will try and address them at the very end of the session. If for any reason that we don't get through all the questions tonight, we will, as we did in the last webinar, we will send it out to panelists, ask them to respond, and then we'll disseminate the answers to you. The session is being recorded this evening, and so hopefully those who couldn't join or might have missed the beginning of the session will be able to catch up on whatever they've missed. I think I'm going to pass over to Eirlys now. Like I said, she's going to discuss some of her experiences of living with MS. Diolch, Eirlys.
Iawn, thank you very much, Kat. By thanking Kat for the opportunity to tell you about my story. I'll just tell you a little bit about my life history previous to MS. Married with 3 children, running a home and working, also looking after our 2 dogs and 1 cat. I had a very busy and active lifestyle, playing badminton and some tennis, along with enjoying long walks and running around with after-school activities for the children and helping out with brownies. My main love in life, apart from my family, was playing the piano, playing the keyboards, a bit of guitar and singing, of course. Life was very busy. I was a bank manager in a small branch, which meant that you had to be jack of all trades. I managed and trained the staff and sometimes served customers and deal with queries. I sold mortgages, insurance, pensions, savings and investments. It was very stressful, but I loved it. I used to thrive on this. I was in various choirs over the years and had a singing group. We used to go out entertaining at various venues and raising money for charities, which brought me great pleasure. I was also involved with the church, played the organ in services, weddings and funerals, and singing in the church choir, and was the secretary of the parochial church council. And I also audited the church books for a number of years. However, by this time, which was around the year 2000, I wasn't quite myself and was catching any viruses that were going around. I was always ill with something, but because life was so busy, I put my health to one side and just kept going. I was heavily involved with the local Eisteddfod as well, particularly our annual Anglesey Eisteddfod, which is Eisteddfod Morn. I loved competing there with singing in choirs and solo. And I have also been a secretary for that over the years. In 1996, my mum passed away, which left a huge void in our family. And then exactly 10 years on, in 2006, my life suddenly changed and stopped. My whole world turned upside down. I started to have blurry visions, painful in the right eye, headaches and horrendous, unbearable fatigue and severe balance problems. Now, I started to lose the vision in my right eye and was going back and forth between my optician and doctor, back and forth, sending me one to another. But one day I couldn't cope with the pain any longer. I went to see a different optician who sent me straight to hospital to be checked out. This was the start of my MS journey, which stopped me from being able to do my work that I enjoyed and to live my daily life. At the time, I had various eye tests and other tests as they thought I possibly had a stroke or a blood clot. I had loads of blood taken and an MRI. The MRI lesions were dismissed as I was 50 years of age, so I was too old to be starting with MS, apparently. Also, the eye clinic ruled out that it was optic neuritis, though I knew this was what it was. I was told there was something else called non-arteritic AION, which I'd never heard of before, and it was never really explained to me. In 2007, 12 months on, I had to retire from work due to ill health. After being off work for 12 months, I struggled to get out of bed in the mornings and various strange symptoms that I couldn't explain all over your body, could not explain what was going on. Then at the beginning of 2009, I paid privately to see a neurologist, as I knew there was something wrong with me. I was seen in Glenclwyd Hospital and had another MRI and a lumbar puncture in Walton. Around 3 months later, I received a letter explaining that I had mild MS. Though it took 3 years for the diagnosis, it was a relief to know what was wrong with me and that I was not going mad. Around this time, I was told I wouldn't need any further MRIs, neither when I queried what would happen in the future, would I need any more? And they said, no, you won't need any more. This did take me to a dark place for quite a while, to be honest. I didn't know what was happening or going on. I was in a very dark and foggy place. My head was full of thick mist that would not lift every day. I didn't know what life had in store for me, but I felt I had to be strong for my family. After my diagnosis, the support service was very good from my experience. I regularly saw my consultant and nurse every 6 months initially, then annually. However, since COVID, as you'd imagine, reviews and checkups have not been consistent. I believe we do need to look at the timescales when calling the nurse advice line. Now we have a second MS nurse for North Wales, whoop whoop. I hope these timescales can now improve, as I believe we need to be able to speak with a nurse within 24 hours rather than the 2 or 3 days, which is the timescales at the moment. I attended a newly diagnosed meeting in Llandudno. I think it was about 6 months after diagnosis. However, I was still in a dark place at the time, so I can't really remember much about that day. One of the most important things for me regarding the MS is to be understood and for the wider community to understand the condition. I'm not lazy, I just can't move and do things as I used to. And it's so hard to have to try and adjust that you just cannot just up and go and do what you used to do. I've hardly any strength in my arms and walking is difficult, often worse on occasions and can be for no apparent reason. Walking is difficult. Every step is like trying to wade through thick, wet mud or sand, which is, of course, difficult, but then that sort of exacerbates the fatigue. Symptoms gradually stabilized for me. However, any stress, viruses, or anxiety will still flare up my symptoms and worsen the fatigue. I always lose my voice at these times too, and it can take weeks to come back. So you're either lucky or unlucky today that I've got a voice. I can't remember when I accepted the diagnosis or when life began again for me. I eventually started coming through the fog, though I cannot remember the turning points and can only think that it must have been gradual. Somehow I was involved at the formation of the MS choir, and since meeting Susanna Robinson, my life has changed dramatically for the better. I had a focus again, especially as it involved music and singing, and slowly but surely brought me back out of my shell. Susanna has been so supportive, not just myself, but the whole of Gwynedd and Ynys Môn MS group. We have a WhatsApp group chat that we can catch up daily with each other, and that's been a lifeline through the COVID times. Susanna has also set up a weekly Tuesday chat as we are unable to hold the normal ad hoc meetings because of COVID. And I always look forward to these chats where we keep each other's spirits up. She has definitely been my rock over the years and is always there and seems to sense and know when any of us are going through troubling times, be it to do with the MS or any family problems. Over the period of time, I've had a couple of other health and family challenges since my MS diagnosis, but I pulled through these, thankfully, through the help of physio, family and good friends. There are so many daily challenges due to having MS, which affect your whole body, both mentally and physically. I go through all different emotions, grief for the life I had, and also guilt for not being able to do what I used to. My glass is normally half full, and I feel I have a lot to be thankful and grateful for. As I mentioned previously, my initial diagnosis was mild MS. There are so many variants to MS, and it's very difficult to know where you're at. I was told maybe around 5 years ago that I was now probably into secondary progressive. However, following my last face-to-face appointment with a new neurologist, which was around 3 to 4 years ago now, the follow-up letter I received stated I had just progressive MS. So I'm not sure whether it's primary or secondary progressive that I have. I know this won't make any difference to my condition in the great scheme of things, but I would like to know exactly where I'm at, to be honest, for my own peace of mind. So 16 years on, and I feel I'm now controlling my MS rather than the MS controlling me. Well, most of the time anyway. Now at home, there is only my husband and my little Seren, the little cavalier that we're living in our home. I am blessed that I have 3 married children who have given me lovely grandchildren, which are my focus on life and keep my spirits up. I feel that there is life after MS. However, the understanding of the condition is an ongoing problem, as the majority of times no one can actually see or feel how this condition affects you as a person. I love being part of the MS close network that we have, having been part of the My MS, My Rights, My Choices project. And since then, I have been part of the Pontio project, volunteering and befriending, and hopefully being of some help to others. I also enjoy the various exercise classes and events that are held online since COVID. So life is still good for me, as you learn how to adapt and live life to the full as much as possible, though always aware when fatigue takes over, and I'm still learning how to say no on occasions. Communication and understanding is paramount for one's well-being, and making my own decisions and being involved in my own care is so important. There are exciting things ahead with the new Octopus project, and I'm really excited to learn and hear more about this coming next. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to my personal story. Thank you.
Diolch, Eirlys. Thank you very, very much, Eirlys. It's always nice to have someone's direct experience, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call tonight will have had similar experiences. So thank you very much for being so honest and so positive as well. It's really lovely to hear. So I'm sure